Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, there's been actually some very interesting news, sort of within the boxing sphere today. I've heard possible news that Danny Garcia could go up to face Jamel Charlo, which I think is a very interesting fight. I've heard news all in all that maybe Terrence Crawford could possibly face Jerron Boots Ennis or possibly Errol Spence next after his Sean Porter fight if he is successful. Although I would say that that probably more than likely is not going to happen. But I think that the most interesting news that I've heard today is that Canelo Alvarez, he has announced his possible next opponent, and apparently his next opponent could be actually against a cruiserweight fighter. And apparently this cruiserweight fighter, I believe, is an African fighter from the country of Africa. I don't know exactly which part of Africa or which country he's from, but when it comes down to it, this is a dude that I believe actually is the natural WBC champion at the cruiserweight division. And I think that this is a very interesting fight. Fannon, he's going to talk about it. He's going to give his opinion, and I'm going to give my opinion as well. Let's get into this. Let's see what he has to say.
All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon. We're back at it with some more new boxing news. Breaking news, Canelo Alvarez has announced his next opponent at the WBC convention, and it is a cruiserweight, the WBC cruiserweight champion, Makabu. And, wow, not sure what to think about this one, but let's talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to be talking about Canelo Alvarez and the cruiserweight division, where he is going to be moving to fight for the WBC cruiserweight title against my man Makabu. I'm not gonna forgive me. I'm not gonna kill his first name. I've seen him fight a couple times just in passing.
Before Fannon really goes into his complete breakdown, if you're asking me my personal opinion of this fight, I already know what the LDBC and new media, what they're going to say about this, because, of course, their objective in the first place is usually to tear down Canelo Alvarez. Now, don't get me wrong, certain fighters, when they move up certain weight divisions, they will fight certain guys that knowingly probably will not have a chance or knowingly are not that great of fighters. Like when Mikey Garcia fought Sergey Lipinets, in my opinion, that was because he saw Sergey, or excuse me, not Sergey, but he saw Vasyl Lomachenko, and he realized all in all that that was not a threat that he wanted to deal with. Mikey Garcia, in my opinion, is a fighter that he has maneuvered around so many actual contenders that all in all, throughout his career, that Mikey Garcia, he's actually been one that, in my opinion, has maneuvered around certain fighters. When he went up and fought Errol Spence Jr., the only reason why he did that is because if he ever was going to face Vasyl Lomachenko, if he ever lost to him, he would have the excuse later on, and he would say 5 to 10 years later on down the line saying, well, you know what, yeah, I lost to Vasyl Lomachenko, but the reason why I lost him is because I was never personally the same fighter ever again when I lost to Errol Spence Jr. They think on that line, and that's the same reason why Kell Brook went up and fought Gennady Golovkin, because he did not want to face Errol Spence Jr. at the time. Do I believe that Canelo Alvarez is doing this all in all? Do I think that he's doing the same thing? No, I don't. I think that Canelo Alvarez, I think that he sees an opportunity to become a 5-weight division champion, and I think all in all that he wants it to be over this dude, Makabu, or whatever the hell his name is. I think that in all honesty, this is my opinion, I think that this is a very decent fight. I think that I accidentally rewinded that on accident, but when it comes down to it all in all, I think that this is a very decent fight because I think that it is pretty much a fair fight. I think that Canelo Alvarez, he's a person that all in all, of course, a lot of people, once again, they're going to bitch and moan and complain that, Canelo Alvarez, that he's not facing a real, dude at cruiserweight. But you must understand something, that the fact all in all that you're basically saying that Canelo Alvarez, that if he's possibly cherry picking at cruiserweight, what does that really say about Canelo Alvarez's skill set? Canelo Alvarez is a dude, he may rehydrate to quite a bit. He's a person that rehydrates probably, usually at about 190, maybe even possibly 200 at max. But some of these cruiserweights, even this guy Makabu, I believe, who's about 6 foot and has a 4-inch reach advantage over Canelo Alvarez. This is a dude, all in all, that he's very big. And I can assure you that there is a possibility that he is going to be 20 pounds heavier than Canelo Alvarez. And that's why I'm so interested in this fight, because Canelo Alvarez, he has a real opportunity here to be a cruiserweight champion. That would be a very, very interesting fight. Would I favor him in this fight? Yeah, probably, because I've seen Makabu before. I think Makabu, all in all, he's a very interesting fighter. He's not the worst skilled fighter in the world. He has some slickness to him. I think all in all that he's very decently powerful. So Canelo, he is going to have to watch out for that. And on top of that, he's very, very big compared to Canelo. He pretty much all in all is going to be the height of Caleb Plant, except with way more power and way more size. Now, I don't think that he's as talented or as slick as a Caleb Plant was. This is basically, in my opinion, pretty much like what the Roy Jones Jr. versus John Ruiz matchup was. Now, John Ruiz at the time, he had a win over Evander Holyfield, but Evander Holyfield at that point in time in his career, I don't want to say that he was completely done, but he clearly was not the same fighter that he had used to be. At that point in time, he pretty much had 4 losses in his career and lost a lot of the bigger fights in his career. Like, he had already gotten knocked out by Riddick Bowe and torn up in those fights. Now, of course, he won against Mike Tyson a little bit later, but then he would pretty much lose twice in a row to Lennox Lewis. And then he would win over John Ruiz in that first fight, but then John Ruiz would beat him in the rematch, I believe. So this is pretty much what this matchup is to me. It's pretty much like a Roy Jones Jr. versus John Ruiz fight, where it's an interesting fight because, you know, Canelo overall, he's facing someone that much bigger. But of course, is this dude on the level of Canelo in terms of skills? Of course not. But this is pretty much all in all like, you know, if Floyd were to face, you know, someone at 154 pounds, you know, without a weight drain. When it came down to it, or really not even 154 pounds. This would be like if Floyd Mayweather Jr. had gone on with the fight to face Sergio Martinez or fought a Gennady Golovkin without the weight drain. That's pretty much what this would be. It's very similar when it comes down to it to Roy Jones Jr., like I said, facing John Ruiz when it comes down to it. So maybe all in all, like I said, maybe I don't want to compare it to Floyd facing Sergio Martinez or a Gennady Golovkin, because I don't think that this dude is a class necessarily. But maybe I would say like if Floyd Mayweather Jr., who in my opinion was probably more of a natural 140-pounder, maybe even lighter, maybe if it would be like if he went up to 160 and let's say beat, like I'm trying to think of one of the champions there at one point in time, maybe beat someone like say maybe like a Daniel Geale or something like that. Now, of course, Daniel Geale, he was never an elite fighter when it came down to it, but he still would have had a decent amount of size over Mayweather, so it would have made the fight interesting. It's the same thing here. And this is a dude, all in all, he's a very talented athlete. He does not have bad hand speed. He does not have bad strength at all. This is a dude that, yes, he has a couple losses in his career, and I noticed that he is somewhat hittable. But is Canelo Alvarez's power? Now, we all know that Canelo has great power, but is he going to have enough power to knock this dude out? And will he be able to push him back? Because this is going to be a very interesting fight. A lot of people said that David Benavidez, with his size and his tenacity, that he was going to give Canelo Alvarez a lot of problems. This dude may even be more of a challenge just because of his size and his power for Canelo than even a David Benavidez. And I think David Benavidez, he's somewhat talented in certain ways, but David Benavidez, I just think that he's a little bit too straightforward and a little bit too hittable. And he's around that size of a Canelo Alvarez. You know, if you're going to beat Canelo, like I said, you're going to have one of the two things. You're going to have an A-plus skill set, or on top of that, with having an A-plus skill set or an A-grade skill set, you're going to possibly have to have some strength or size over Canelo. That's what it's going to take at this point in time. And who knows, maybe this is a guy to do it. I doubt it, but we'll see what happens.
We're going to be talking about Canelo Alvarez and the cruiserweight division, where he is going to be moving to fight for the WBC cruiserweight title against my man Makabu. I'm not gonna kill his first name. I've seen him fight a couple times just in passing, but he is the current cruiserweight champion, and so it appears that all the other talk about who.
And like I said, I'm sure there's a few people on the know that are going to say, oh, well, here we go again. Canelo is ducking top-tier opponents. He won't face Charlo or Benavidez, but he'll face this dude who's pretty much a no-name. Well, I would agree if this dude maybe were a light heavyweight, but there is a huge separation between light heavyweight and and a cruiserweight. Now, there has been some light heavyweights that have moved on up to cruiserweight when it comes down to it, but some of these cruiserweights, man, they're no joke. And like I said, I can guarantee you, some of these dudes, man, they rehydrate all the way up to like 220 pounds, if not more. So this is no joke for Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, of course, I don't think that he's dealing with an A-grade skilled opponent, but he's dealing with someone overall that is significantly bigger. Once again, Canelo Alvarez, he ain't that big. He's not as big overall as a prime Roy Jones Jr. was. He's not someone overall that was as fast as a prime Roy Jones Jr. was. Now, if you want to argue that he was more defensively responsible, yeah, sure, I would agree with that. But Canelo has to be careful here.
Canelo Alvarez is going to fight
and like I said, there's going to be a certain amount of people that try to degrade him. But here's my question for those of you people I don't know that want to promote Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade. Let me ask you something, because since you think that these are the fighters to defeat Canelo Alvarez, do you think that those fighters, if they were to move up to cruiserweight and possibly face someone like a Makabu, do you think that they would have the same percentage of beating this guy just as Canelo Alvarez does? Now, maybe in your opinion, that's not a good point. Maybe in your opinion, you say, well, sure, Canelo Alvarez is skilled enough to beat this guy, and we all know that he's significantly bigger, but we all know that this guy all in all doesn't have much of a chance. I would say that he has a decent chance over Canelo. I would not underestimate this guy. This is a guy that is significantly bigger. This is going to be a very, very interesting fight, in my opinion. Now, that does not mean that Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade or David Benavidez, who knows, maybe they can provide more challenges for Canelo than this guy, but I'm going to say this. This guy is this guy is very, very dangerous. I give this guy at least a 30% chance over Canelo. Now, I understand that, once again, he's not an A-plus fighter. He's not a fighter that has A-grade skills, but he's not a fighter that has C-class skills either. This is a dude that, he's dangerous. He's dangerous if you're not careful with him. So, Canelo better watch out in this fight.
Whether it be David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade, Charlo, or whatever, all of that is by the wayside because Canelo Alvarez is going to be moving to cruiserweight to fight for the WBC championship. Now, I want to be positive about this and say that, I understand how people are going to market this, and I know there's a lot of Canelo Alvarez fans and casual boxing fans that are going to really, cheer Canelo Alvarez for this. They're going to say, hey, he's moving up into another weight class, all the way up to cruiserweight, shows how great a fighter he is. He's making history. He's won, undisputed in 12 months at 168. He's going to leapfrog 175 and then go for a belt at cruiserweight and win a cruiserweight title. But here's the problem. Makaba is not a world-class fighter, okay?
I would somewhat agree with that. Like I said, I don't think that Makaba, or whatever, Alunga, whatever his name is, I don't necessarily think that he's A-grade. I think that that's fair to say. But like I said, I don't think that John Ruiz, when he was facing off with Roy Jones Jr., I don't think all in all that he was A-grade either. That's pretty much what this fight is to me. This is pretty much like when Bernard Hopkins beat John Pascal, John Pascal, he was on a higher grade overall than this guy. Let me give John Pascal credit. So maybe I would not compare it to that. But like I said, this reminds me a lot of the Roy Jones Jr. versus John Ruiz type of fight. This is what this reminds me of.
He's not. And in this particular instance, what Canelo Alvarez is doing is he's going to get that belt. And he's going against that belt against a guy that is about as soft a touch as you can have in the cruiserweight division. The only chance...
I would somewhat agree with that, but what I'm going to say is this. Well, actually, maybe I don't completely agree with that because he says as soft a touch as you can get. Well, I think that he's a softer touch all in all than that one British fighter that's there, I believe, or maybe all in all, that's Alexander Usyk or Michael Hunter, certain people that used to be there, but this guy is, like I said, this guy's no joke. This dude has a lot of power. He's very decently big. Canelo's going to have to be very careful.
That opponent has against Canelo Alvarez is if he's just can muster a lot of power and is lucky enough to hurt Canelo Alvarez in the ring and knock Canelo Alvarez out. Other than that, these are just two entirely different level of fighters. I know the man has a championship belt, but that's about all he has. The reason that he has the belt is that he won a vacant title that was dropped by Alexander Usyk when Alexander Usyk moved up to heavyweight. Alexander Usyk, if you don't recall, was the WBA, the IBF, the WBC, and the WBO champion. He moves up to chase heavyweight titles, and that belt became vacant. Makabu won that belt. And again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name. Makaba won the belt in a vacant title. But if you go to BoxRec and you look at the record, at his actual record, what you will see is the story of a fighter that is a basic level journeyman. He had been knocked.
Well, I don't know if I would really go as far to call him a journeyman. I would say that someone like, if we're talking about Deontay Wilder's resume, for example, I would say that Artur Spiltzka is what we would call a journeyman because journeymans, in my opinion, they don't usually win belts. Makaba, when it comes down to it, or whatever the hell his name is, like I said, yes, this dude is not A grade, but like I said, Canelo better watch out in this fight because this dude is very, very big.
Knocked out several years ago by Tony Bellew when Tony Bellew, fought at cruiserweight briefly. Tony Bellew really is a light heavyweight. Moved up to cruiserweight for a minute, fought and got knocked out by Alexander Usyk I do believe Alexander Usyk's only defense of the cruiserweight title. I've never really thought that Tony Bellew was some world beater fighter, not a super high level fighter.
I never thought that he was necessarily a world beater either, but Tony Bellew was at least a decent fighter, at least at cruiserweight when it came down to it. He was a decent fighter. I would at least give Tony Bellew the grade of at least possibly being A- at the cruiserweight division. Tony Bellew, in my opinion, was never a skilled fighter, but you could debate him as an A fighter, at least at the cruiserweight division.
In my opinion, and he knocked this guy out. So,
because he did give Alexander Usyk some tough rounds, I believe. So it's not like Tony Bellew. It's not like he's just some bum on the side of the street.
What you're getting here is you're getting form over substance out of Canelo, and it more than likely is it going to be roundly cheered by everybody in boxing. But at the same time, man, it is what it is. That's what I'll say. It is what it is. It is a way for Canelo Alvarez to add more accolades to his resume. So when you read his resume out, that's what it's going to sound like. It's going to say 154.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Canelo Alvarez, I believe right now, is a 4-weight division champion. Canelo Alvarez knows that if he takes this fight all in all, that he's going to be looked at as one of the all-time greats, no doubt about it. Now, it doesn't really matter whether this guy is A-class or not, because once again, I don't think that John Ruiz against Roy Jones Jr., I don't necessarily think that he was A-class, when it came down to it. But Roy Jones Jr. knew that at the end of the day, that if he was able to defeat John Ruiz, that people would look at him and say, wow, he was able to go from, middleweight all the way up to heavyweight. Who else has really been able to do that? Canelo Alvarez knows that if he does that, it's going to be looked at on that same level. It'll be very interesting.
Pound champion, 160-pound champion, 168-pound champion, 175-pound champion, cruiserweight champion. But if you look at it and you pull it off a little bit, you just kind of look under it a little bit, you'll say, okay, but when has Canelo Alvarez actually beaten all the best fighters in a particular weight class? And I would argue that he has.
Well, when it comes down to it, if you're talking about beating every single one, I mean, yeah, sure, you can maybe say it's single things, but once again, let's not try to undermine Canelo Alvarez's resume here. You're talking about a dude that has defeated Araceli Lara, Gennady Golovkin, Danny Jacobs, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Austin Trout, Miguel Cotto, Sergey Kovalev. I mean, the amount of A-class names on this dude's resume is actually unbelievable.
Never done that. At 154 pounds, he did not beat the best fighters at 154 pounds. He lost to
Yes, he did. He ended up beating Austin Trout. He ended up winning a controversial decision over Araceli Lara, but he ended up winning it, nonetheless. It is what it is. Then at 160, he ended up beating Gennady Golovkin, who was the hands-down best middleweight fighter at the time. I don't give a shit what anyone says. And then all in all, he fought Danny Jacobs, who was one of the best fighters there. And then later on, sure, he would fight Rocky Fielding. Rocky Fielding, in my opinion, was not an A-grade opponent. But, he ended up beating him. Callum Smith was the Ring Magazine champion at the time. He was a real deal fighter, in my opinion. In my opinion, is he a fighter that is a world beater? Not necessarily, but in my opinion, he's a little bit of an underrated fighter. Sure, he's one of those basic, straightforward British fighters, but he's also a dude that had light heavyweight type of power. And Canelo Alvarez, all in all, he was able to completely destroy him. I mean, it wasn't even close. And then on top of that, then he beats Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. We all know Canelo Alvarez's resume. It's on a whole nother level.
In the best fight that he had there against Floyd Mayweather Jr., I believe, and a lot of people thought, that he lost to Erislandy Lara. He moves up to 160 pounds and he gets the best win of his career against Gennady Golovkin, but then he does not unify against Demetrius Andrade. He does not fight Jermall Charlo. At 168 pounds, he unifies the division without a doubt. David Benavidez is the real guy that should have been holding that WBC title. If you wanted to prove that he was actually the best at 100...
Well, no, he didn't hold the WBC title because David Benavidez tested positive for a substance that was banned. That was made in cocaine, which I believe sometimes also can hide PEDs. So it is what it is. So no, David Benavidez should have not been the one holding the WBC title because David Benavidez was not responsible enough. Now, once again, do I want to see the David Benavidez fight? Absolutely. But once again, I actually don't mind this fight happening because Canelo, like I said, this would be a little bit of a different situation if Canelo Alvarez either A, had no chance whatsoever, and it majorly looked like that, kind of like the Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence Jr. fight, and Canelo said, oh, I just want to go up and be great, like that bullshit. It'd be a little bit different all in all if, in my opinion, this was a guy that maybe was on the Rocky Fielding level. This is not a guy all in all that, he's not a joke. This is not a guy all in all that is a bad fight. Now, once again, do I think that he's A grade? No, I do not. But Canelo Alvarez, he is not a natural cruiserweight. I don't even think that Canelo Alvarez is a natural light heavyweight. This is going to be a dude that is fighting two weight divisions out of bounds. So this is what makes this fight interesting. Is Canelo Alvarez going to be the favorite? Absolutely. But this is not going to be a fight all in all that Canelo Alvarez can underestimate the guy. This is a dude all in all you have to very much watch out for.
68 pounds, he could fight David Benavidez and prove that he's the best at 168 pounds to people that are actually looking and trying to figure out who the best fighter in the division is. At 175 pounds, he fought Sergey Kovalev. The Sergey Kovalev fight is what it is. Sergey Kovalev was not the top 175 pounder. Artur Beterbiev.
That's true overall, but wait, what did he say? Artur Beterbiev? What the hell? It's Artur Beterbiev, I believe. But anyway, no, Sergey Kovalev was not the top 175-pound dog at the time, but he still was an elite champion. It is what it is. Like I said, there's a difference between what Mikey Garcia was doing when he was facing Sergey Lipinets, who was a clear B-class fighter, and, clear fights that a lot of these fighters really didn't have any chance in. Canelo is at least fighting fighters that we know are championship caliber.
Or Bivol, whichever one was the top guy in that division. And now at cruiserweight, this guy is probably the win. I can't really say that I have a lot of knowledge of everybody at cruiserweight, but this is not Murat Gassiev. This is not Maris Bradis. This is not Dorticos. This is not any of the guys that were at the top of that.
Well, that's possibly true, but I'm not really sure overall how Dorticos or, that one Cuban fighter, really how great he is in the first place anyway. But like I said, I don't necessarily mind Canelo Alvarez facing this guy because, once again, Canelo is not a natural cruiserweight. And the fact that people overall are complaining and saying, wow, why are you facing this guy? That tells me all in all that they know how good Canelo Alvarez really is. Because it's kind of like the same thing when people were complaining about Floyd Mayweather Jr., all in all, not moving up to 160 pounds. And they basically said, oh, well, why won't you fight Gennady Golovkin? Why won't you fight Sergio Martinez? Floyd is a dude that rehydrates at about 147 to 150 pounds. Facing a guy that could be at middleweight, you're talking about a guy that can rehydrate all the way up to 180. He would literally be outweighed by almost 30, 40 pounds. Or 30 pounds at least.
Of the World Boxing Super Series, that cruiserweight tournament that Alexander Usyk won. The guy was nowhere near. I don't even know if he was in that tournament. Don't believe that he was in the tournament, but definitely is not one of the top cruiserweights. He's a guy that holds a belt. So,
well, he has to be one of the top cruiserweights because he holds a belt. But I understand what you're saying. He's not necessarily someone that I would favor over some of the top guys either. But like I said, for Canelo, in my opinion, this is an acceptable fight because Canelo, he's obviously a dude that really should not even be naturally fighting in cruiserweight anyway. He really even shouldn't be naturally fighting in light heavyweight because all those guys outsize him. So the fact that Canelo actually, I understand Canelo, he's looking at this dude and he's saying, I have an opportunity all in all to more than likely get this cruiserweight win just in case I never possibly get that opportunity again. But hey, to be honest with you, I really don't have a problem with that because it's really the same thing that I think Roy Jones Jr. did with John Ruiz.
Again, Canelo Alvarez is going form over substance from my point of view in this particular occasion, and he's going to be celebrated for it. And he's going to, and I don't even think he's going to get a pass for it. You know, the good thing is that Makaba's going to make a lot of money in the fight. I'm not sure whether he's going to get the same $10 million to sell his belt that, you know, basically to sell his belt. He does not, I'm just...
To sell his belt. I don't think that Makaba overall, no, I understand where Fannon is coming from. I do. I understand. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, I would not underestimate this guy. This guy is no blowover. Now, I understand that this guy, you know, he's not an A-grade fighter, understandably, but like I said, Canelo, I mean, let's just talk about his size. Canelo is a guy that rehydrates about 185 to 190. At least that's the max weight that I usually see him rehydrate at. Canelo is 5'9" if he's lucky, and on top of that, he has about a 71-inch arm reach at most. This is a guy that is a natural cruiserweight and is a guy all in all that, you know, has 25 knockouts within about 30 fights when it comes down to, of course, with 2 losses. And on top of that, he's decently bigger than Canelo. So this is going to be an interesting one.
I've seen him fight a little bit. I'm looking at his record, and I'm telling you, if Canelo Alvarez even decided to fight him, it's already a wrap. The guy doesn't have a chance to win. And here's the thing. You can say, well, how many people at 168 would go up and fight at cruiserweight? Man, look, these dudes are not going to go up and fight that guy at cruiserweight because there will be no money for him to do it.
Yes, but, you know, that's a little bit understandable. But let me ask you something. Let's ask this question instead. Do you think Jamal Charlo, do you think Demetrius Andrade, do you think any of those guys could possibly go up all the way to cruiserweight and possibly win a fight like this? And if the answer is no, that's how we know that Canelo Alvarez is on a different level.
Canelo Alvarez brings the money with him, so therefore there's money in the fight because Canelo Alvarez is there. However, David Benavidez is not going to go up and fight Makabu, but I'm telling you, if he did jump up there and fight him in his first fight at cruiserweight, jumped a weight class, I would pick David Benavidez to beat him too.
I'm not completely sure about that one. I think that, you know, who knows when it comes down to it, but David Benavidez, he's not a natural cruiserweight. David Benavidez is a dude that, you know, he's a natural, you know, he's probably a natural light heavyweight. Now, some light heavyweights, they can convert very well to 200 pounds, but David Benavidez, when I take a look at him, he's just a little bit too hittable. It is what it is.
I would take Sergey Kovalev to beat him. I'm telling you, I may take...
Well, Sergey Kovalev maybe. But, of course, natural light heavyweights, you know, especially people with great power, you know. Now, if you were to say, like, an Artur Beterbiev, yes, I would believe that an Artur Beterbiev would beat him, but Artur Beterbiev, he's more adjusted for a weight class like that. Canelo is a natural middleweight. He's going all the way up to cruiserweight, so like I said, I don't really have a problem with this fight.
I'll probably take Caleb Plant to beat him. He's just not that level.
You would take Caleb Plant to beat Makabu, someone that is all the way up at cruiserweight. Interesting.
A fighter. He is an African domestic level fighter that got his hands on a belt, a placeholder belt, and now Canelo Alvarez is going to come get it from him. And, you know, my hat's off to him, but and I understand what they're trying to do, and if that's the way that they view making history, hey, man, that's the way that they view history.
Your hat is off to him, but let me discredit Canelo Alvarez's whole entire career. I get it. Listen, I understand Fannon all in all, but, you know, I understand all of his points, but what I am going to say is this. I don't think Fannon overall would be saying the same things, and I certainly know for sure that LDBC and New Media, they would not be saying the same things because Terrence Crawford was going to go up to 154 at one point in time and possibly face Patrick Teixeira, who is really about a C-class fighter. A person all in all that easily lost to Brian Castano. And Terrence is a natural welterweight, so that was only going to be him out of his element within one weight division. And some people are going to say, what are you talking about? Terrence has moved up multiple weight divisions. Yes, he has, but when he rehydrates all the way up to 160. Terrence has always really been a natural welterweight. It is what it is. And on top of that, he's a dude that has about a 72 to 74 inch arm reach, and he's about 5'8". He may even be the same height as Canelo Alvarez. Because I'm not sure if Canelo Alvarez really is an actual 5'9".
Making history. Personally, I would rather see him fight somebody that I think is a world-class fighter or a top-level fighter. And if he winds up beating David Benavidez, if he beats Arthur Beterbiev, or if he beats Bivol at 175, so be it. And that's accolades for him. If he,
to be honest with you, I think that possibly could be the next step. We'll see what happens, but Canelo Alvarez, he's at a very interesting point in his career right now. He's basically to the point to where he can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants. So we'll see all in all what happens. That's going to be a very interesting fight. And actually, this is my opinion. Some people may disagree. I actually think that this is a very interesting move. I think that actually it's a decent move because I think that this may give Canelo Alvarez some time to adjust sort of to that weight. And all in all, see if he can take that super fight with Artur Beterbiev and possibly take a fight with Dimitri Bivol. Because Canelo really is not even naturally those guys' size. So we'll see what happens.
Moving up to fight Marius Bradis, I wouldn't be saying this. I would be saying, wow, that's incredible. He's going to fight Marius Bradis, or he's going to fight, I don't believe Gassiev has a belt. Gassiev might actually moved up to heavyweight. If he was going to go fight one of those guys for the belt, then I would be like, wow. But in this particular instance, I just think that more than likely, he's just fighting a big guy that is a domestic level fighter when he's a smaller world-class level.
Well, I agree, but like I said, for other people that had no problem with Roy Jones Jr. doing it with John Ruiz, you should have no problem with Canelo Alvarez doing this with Makabu. Because once again, Roy Jones Jr., he was not fighting an A-grade level heavyweight in John Ruiz, but, he accomplished history there. At the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, he knows that this move is going to make history for his name. It is what it is.
Fighter, and more than likely he's going to win that fight. Not a lot different than Roy Jones Jr. fighting John Ruiz, but actually not even as quite. John Ruiz is a better heavyweight than Makabu is a cruiserweight.
Well, probably, but John Ruiz was never A-grade. It is what it is, but I agree. It's pretty much on that same level. Somewhat, at least.
Wait, that's my take on the issue. It is what it is, man. Knock it out, Canelo, you do you. But I'm not going to confuse myself and think that I'm watching the best fight, or that this is going to prove he's the best fighter in the world, or a historic level fighter.
Well, Canelo Alvarez already has proved that he's the best fighter in the world anyway, so it is what it is. The only way that can change is if Canelo loses this fight. I think that this is a chase for history, and I don't really have a problem with it because, in my opinion, Canelo, he just recently unified a division. Now, of course, people, they say, well, he should face Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez. Sure, I think that those fights should happen eventually, but I understand why Canelo was going after this guy. If this were Canelo going after, say, someone that I thought was very, very weak, let's say at 175 or something, then maybe I would say, okay, I don't necessarily like this fight because Canelo can at least somewhat handle himself there. But I'm going to be very interested to see how he handles himself against a natural cruiserweight. This is going to be very, very interesting. So we'll see what happens.
Doing this, he'd be better off, from my point of view, beating guys in his own weight class and staying there and beating and defending against guys in the same weight class that are all, world-class fighters. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.
And that's pretty much all I got to say on this as well. But this is going to be a very, very interesting fight for me, at least. Because Makabu, like I said, he's not someone that I consider A-grade. But he has evolved into a little bit of a better fighter. And he has won at least some decent fights, I believe, against some undefeated prospects in the cruiserweight division. So I'm not, like I said, this dude is not a part of the Bum of the Month club. I'm not saying that he's an A-grade fighter. But he's within that B to B- category probably. And some of you may think, well, Canelo shouldn't be facing something like that. All I'm saying is this. Like I said, this to me is on par right with that Roy Jones Jr. and John Ruiz fight. And I know there's going to be some people out there that say, oh, John Ruiz, he beat Evander Holyfield. Yes, he beat Evander Holyfield after Evander Holyfield got the shit kicked out of him by like a couple of other fighters. So it is what it is. Evander was never the same after the Riddick Bowe, and all in all, usually after the Lennox Lewis fights. It is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what y'all think of the fight, and I'll talk to y'all later.